You weren't expecting it. Maybe it was a phone call. Maybe it was nothing at all, just one of those nights where everything catches up with you at once. You're sitting on the edge of the couch, or maybe the floor, and the tears come before you can stop them. And then you feel it. A cold nose pressing against your hand, a warm body pushing into your side. Your dog is there. They didn't bark, they didn't run to the door, they just appeared. Head low, eyes up. That look. Most people smile through their tears and say something like, "It's okay, buddy, I'm fine." And then they move on, because the assumption is that your dog heard a weird noise, came to investigate, and is now a little confused by whatever's happening on your face. But cognitive ethology, the science of animal minds, says something very different. What your dog just did, that quiet approach, that specific posture, that refusal to leave your side, is one of the most remarkable displays of cross-species emotional processing ever documented in science, and almost no one understands what's actually happening inside their head when it occurs. Let's start with what most people believe. The common explanation is simple. Your dog heard an unusual sound, sobbing, sniffling, sharp breaths, and came over because it was novel. They're curious, maybe slightly anxious. They don't understand what crying is, they just know something sounds different, the way they'd notice a smoke alarm or a thunderclap. It sounds reasonable, but it's wrong. In 2012, researchers at Goldsmiths, University of London, designed an experiment to test this exact question. They wanted to know, do dogs actually distinguish between crying and other sounds, or are they just reacting to noise? They placed 18 dogs, one at a time, in a room with two people, the dog's owner and a complete stranger. Each person took turns either crying, humming, or talking casually. Same volume, same room, same dog. If dogs were simply responding to unusual sounds, they'd react equally to crying and humming. Both are atypical. If they were just seeking comfort for themselves, they'd always go to their owner, regardless of who was upset. Neither happened. The dogs approached whoever was crying, not humming, not talking, crying specifically. And here's the part that changes everything. They approached the stranger who was crying just as readily as their own owner. Think about what that means. Your dog isn't going to the crying person because that person is their source of food or walks or safety. They're going to the crying person because that person is in distress. The response is oriented toward the one who needs help, not toward the one who feeds them. The researchers noted something else. The dogs didn't approach with playful body language or excitement. They approached with submissive, nuzzling behavior, head low, body soft, pushing gently against the person. This is the exact behavioral profile that ethologists associate with comforting contact in social mammals. They weren't investigating a sound, they were responding to suffering. But here's where it gets deeper. Because approaching someone who's upset is one thing. What a dog is willing to do to reach you when you're in pain, that's something else entirely. In 2018, a research team led by Emily Sanford designed what might be the most emotionally revealing dog study ever conducted. They called it, informally, the Timmy's in the Well experiment. Here's how it worked. Dog owners were placed behind a door, a lightweight door held shut by magnets, easy enough for any dog to push open. The owners were instructed to either cry loudly or hum Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star in a calm, steady voice. The researchers measured two things, whether the dogs opened the door and how fast. The results were staggering. Dogs whose owners were crying opened the door 3 times faster than dogs whose owners were humming. 3 times. They didn't just notice the difference, they were compelled to act on it. The sound of their person in distress created an urgency that nothing else triggered. But the most important finding wasn't about speed. It was about what happened inside the dogs who didn't open the door. Because some dogs didn't open it, and when the researchers examined the data, they found that the dogs who failed to reach their crying owners weren't calm, they weren't indifferent, their stress indicators were through the roof, heart rate elevated, cortisol spiking, body language consistent with extreme anxiety. They were too distressed to act. The researchers recognized this pattern immediately because it's identical to a well-documented phenomenon in human psychology. It's called empathic distress. When a person feels another person's pain so intensely that they become overwhelmed and freeze, unable to help even though they desperately want to. Your dog didn't fail to reach you because they didn't care. They failed because they felt too much. That distinction between feeling distressed by someone's pain and feeling distressed for someone in pain is one of the most debated questions in the entire field of animal cognition. For decades, scientists argued that true empathy was uniquely human, that animals might show emotional contagion, catching a feeling the way you catch a yawn, but never genuine empathy, never the ability to recognize that another being is suffering and be moved to act. This study broke that argument open, because the dogs who did open the door, the ones who pushed through and reached their crying owners, weren't calm either. They were stressed, but they were regulated enough to act despite their own distress. That's not contagion. That's not confusion. That is pro-social helping behavior driven by emotional empathy in a non-human animal. Published in a peer-reviewed journal, and almost no one outside of behavioral science has ever heard of it. Now I need to tell you what's happening inside your dog's brain when they hear you cry, because we're not guessing anymore. We've seen it. In 2014, a research team led by Attila Andich at Eötvös University in Budapest accomplished something that had never been done before in neuroscience. They trained dogs to lie completely still, fully awake inside an fMRI scanner, the same machine used to map activity in the human brain, and played them a series of sounds, human voices, dog vocalizations, environmental noises, and critically, emotional sounds, laughter, crying, whimpering, playful barking. What they found made international headlines. Dogs have a dedicated voice processing region in their temporal cortex, anatomically similar in location to the one humans use, and when emotional sounds were played, regardless of whether they came from a human or another dog, specific areas in the dog's brain activated, the same areas, across species. When your dog hears you cry, their brain doesn't process it as random noise. It's routed through the same emotional architecture that processes the distress calls of their own kind. Your pain sounds like their pain. Neurologically, your suffering is not foreign to them. It is familiar. And it gets stranger. Human crying activates the amygdala in dogs, the brain region responsible for fear, threat, and emotional significance, but it also activates regions associated with reward and social attachment. Your dog's brain is simultaneously alarmed by your distress and driven to approach you. That's why they come to you with that exact look, concern in their eyes but determination in their body. Their brain is telling them two things at once. Something is wrong, and I need to be close to this person. But here's something almost nobody knows. Your dog doesn't just hear your pain, they can smell it.
In 2022, researchers at the University of British Columbia conducted an extraordinary experiment. They collected human sweat samples, some taken during moments of acute psychological stress, others taken during calm, neutral states. The samples were presented to dogs in sealed containers where the dogs couldn't see or hear any human cues, just smell. The dogs could tell the difference. With an accuracy rate of 93.75%, dogs correctly identified stress samples from calm samples. 93.75% from sweat alone. Your dog doesn't need to hear you cry. They don't need to see your face. The chemical composition of your body changes when you're in emotional pain. Your sweat, your breath, your skin. And your dog can detect that shift with a sense of smell that is conservatively 10,000 times more sensitive than yours. When you're sitting quietly at a dinner table, holding it together, telling everyone you're fine, your dog already knows you're not. They knew before the first tear fell. They knew from across the room. They knew because your body told them in a language that predates words by millions of years. And this is where it becomes something that's hard to say without it sounding like exaggeration. But it's not. In 2019, researchers at Linköping University in Sweden published a study in Scientific Reports that tracked cortisol levels, the primary stress hormone, in 58 dogs and their owners, not over an afternoon, not during a single lab session, over the course of an entire year. They measured cortisol concentrations in hair, which captures long-term hormonal patterns rather than moment-to-moment spikes, and the correlation was unmistakable. Dogs' long-term stress levels mirrored their owners, not loosely, not occasionally, consistently across months and seasons. When the owner's cortisol was elevated over a period of weeks, the dog's cortisol was elevated over the same period. When the owner's stress dropped, so did the dog's. The synchronization was so strong that the dog's own life circumstances, their activity level, their breed, their training, their environment, had less influence on their stress hormones than their owner's emotional state did. Read that again. Your emotional state affects your dog's biology more than their own life does. When you're going through something, grief, anxiety, heartbreak, months of quiet desperation, your dog isn't just sitting next to you looking sad. Their endocrine system is shifting, their stress hormones are climbing, their neurochemistry is reorganizing itself around your pain. They are not observing your suffering, they are absorbing it. And this is the part of the video I need you to really hear, because there's a cost to this. If your dog is biologically wired to absorb your emotional state, and the evidence overwhelmingly says they are, then chronic human distress doesn't just affect the human. Veterinary behaviorists have documented that dogs living in households with prolonged emotional conflict, grief, or mental health crises show significantly higher rates of anxiety-related behaviors, excessive licking, pacing, digestive problems, disrupted sleep, loss of appetite. A study published in the Journal of Veterinary Behavior found that dogs whose owners scored high on measures of neuroticism and chronic anxiety were significantly more likely to exhibit compulsive behaviors themselves. Not because the dogs were mistreated, not because anything was overtly wrong in the household, because their nervous systems were faithfully mirroring the emotional state of the person they were bonded to. Your dog's loyalty to your feelings isn't selective. They don't just show up for the single bad evening and then reset in the morning. If you're hurting for weeks, they're hurting for weeks. If you're quietly drowning, they're quietly drowning beside you. And they will never tell you, because they can't. So, if you're going through something right now, and maybe that's part of why you clicked on this video, know this. Getting help for yourself isn't just about you. It might be the most important thing you can do for your dog, because they are carrying what you're carrying, and they will carry it silently, without complaint, for as long as you do. But also know this. That thing they do, that nudge against your hand, that weight pressed into your side, that warm skull resting in your palm at the exact moment you need it most, that isn't coincidence, and it isn't confusion. That is the product of 15,000 years of two species learning to read each other's pain. A brain that evolved to process your voice the way it processes the distress calls of its own kind. A nose that can detect your suffering in the chemistry of your skin before a single tear reaches your cheek. And a nervous system so attuned to yours that your stress becomes their stress, your grief becomes their grief, across months and years and a lifetime spent in the same home. So the next time you're sitting on the floor at midnight and the tears come before you can stop them, and you feel that cold nose press into your hand, don't say, "I'm fine." They already know you're not, and they came anyway. Not because they were confused, not because they heard a noise, because every system in their body, neurological, chemical, evolutionary, told them the same thing. You're hurting, and there is nowhere else they would rather be. If this changed how you see your dog, subscribe to this channel and leave a comment below. I want to know, Has your dog ever shown up for you at a moment when no one else did? And if you've ever wondered what's really happening when your dog follows you from room to room, never letting you out of their sight, that's the next video. And the reason behind it goes much deeper than you think.